Domain and range of functions. If we are given functions as equations in terms of x and y, we can write the domain and the range in several different ways. The domain are all of the possible x values of the function. So what I mean by that is we can write it in several different ways. When you see a picture of a graph, you can look at your x values, your left and right, go along your axis, left and right, to see what values are included. So you can write it as an inequality, which we've already talked about. So it would be your smallest number is less than or equal to. It could also be less than or equal to your x value, which is less than or equal to another number, your highest value. That's a possibility. There might be a hole in the middle of the graph, and then you'd have to split it up and have multiple inequalities, or you can use an interval notation and have it written with parentheses between your numbers, or square brackets. Square brackets are the or equal to, and the parentheses are just less than or greater than. Alright? Now, ranges are a little bit different. The range is all possible y values of the function. So instead of looking on the x-axis like we were up here, this was the x-axis, and the y-axis is right here. So if we have a graph of some sort, we have our x, and that's going to correspond to the domain, and then our y is going to correspond to our range, so up and down. So we can still write that as an inequality, and that would be our number less than, so always start with the small one, or less than or equal to, both those are possible. Then our y, we're just going to put the y in the middle, less than or equal to, and we have our bigger number. So we can still do it the same way, or we can use interval notation, which uses parentheses for your less than or greater thans, and then square brackets for anything that is less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. Okay, so range is all the possible y values that it is, and it could be written as an inequality or as an interval, or the domain is any possible x values that it can be, left and right, and can also be written as an inequality or an interval. Just remember, domain goes to x and range goes to y. So with these examples, we want to identify the domain and range of the graph. So as I am looking at this graph, it looks like it peaks out here at 3, and then it goes left forever, and it goes right forever. So the left and the right are my domain. So when I am classifying my domain, can be all real numbers. X can be anything we want it to be because it goes on forever and everything is included. So how I could write that as an inequality is negative infinity is less than x, which is less than positive infinity. Okay, so that would be if I wrote it as an inequality. You could write it in words, which is fine. That means the same thing. It can be any real number. or you can write it as an inequality, or we could write it as an interval, which would be we're going all the way to negative infinity up to positive infinity. So that is interval notation. And any one of those is fine. Now the range, we're going to be looking at our y's, so we're going to be looking at it up and down. We've already noticed that it peaks out here at 3, and then it goes down forever. It keeps going. So we can write that out in words. Y can be any number less than 3, but it is equal to 3, so I should say less than or equal to. Okay, so if I were to write that as an inequality, I would have negative infinity, because it's negative forever, is less than y is less than or equal to 3. And that would be an inequality. Okay, so we can also find a interval. So if I'm finding interval notation, then it goes negative infinity forever up to 3, but it includes 3, so we put a square bracket around 3, and that would be interval. And that would be your final answer. You can pick any one of those to describe it. In this next example, we want to find the domain and range of this function. So when we are looking at the domain, we are going to be looking left and right, and it ends up going forever in the right direction and forever in the left direction. However, there is a hole right there, and then it goes forever from there and from there. So what that means is we can't include that number. So what that means is x can be all real numbers except negative 2, and the reason that is because right here is x is negative 2, and there's a hole in the graph there. So what that means is we can write an inequality of negative infinity is less than x, which is less than negative 2, and negative 2 is less than x, which is less than positive infinity. So that's a possibility for an inequality. Or we could write interval negative infinity up to but not including negative 2, and negative 2 up to infinity. Now the range will become the all real numbers, because as we look up and down, every number is included somewhere, because even that spot right here is included because it's included all along this line right here. So our y is all real numbers, so you can explain it in words. You could write an inequality, negative infinity is less than y, which is less than positive infinity, or you could write it as an interval, negative infinity to positive infinity, and that's your final answer. You can pick one of those. And the last example, we have kind of a curvy shaped graph, but it stops, there's no arrows on it. So my x is going to go left and right, so my x starts here, included there at negative 4, and then it goes up to, and then stops, not included, at 5. So how I would write that in words, x is all numbers including negative 4, but not up to, but not including 5. So we can also write it as an inequality. Negative 4 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 5. Or an interval would be negative 4 including negative 4, so a square bracket, up to 5, but not including 5. Now our range are our possible y values. So that's going to come up here to 3, and then go down to negative 3. And both of those are included, because this point is included and the negative 3 is included. So how we would write that is we could say y is all numbers between negative 3 and 3, including the endpoints. So if we wanted to write an inequality, we could just say negative 3 is less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to 3. It's in between negative 3 and 3. Or we could say as an interval, negative 3, including negative 3, up to 3, including 3. And that would be your final answer. Just pick one of those to explain the domain and range. So those are your notes over the domain and range of functions. Go through some practice problems, make sure you can do these, and explain them in the way that you're most comfortable, and then you should be ready for your quiz over this material.